The neighborhood was quiet, but whispers carried farther than anyone realized. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association, ruled the community with an iron fist. She fined neighbors for leaving garbage cans out too long, demanded everyone keep their lawns at perfect length, and sent endless, threatening letters. But despite her harshness, people began to notice something unusual. Karen herself was living larger than life. Her house suddenly had a brand new luxury SUV parked in the driveway. Expensive renovations began popping up. Italian marble floors, a state-of-the-art home theater, even a heated pool installed practically overnight. Neighbors scratched their heads. Karen's day job was nothing glamorous. She worked part-time at a small insurance office. So how did she afford such extravagance? At first, people assumed she must have received an inheritance or perhaps her husband got a raise. But then came the HOA meeting. Karen strutted in, dripping with designer jewelry and carrying a handbag worth more than most families' monthly mortgage. While she barked at residents about late dues, members quietly exchanged looks. Something wasn't adding up. One resident, Michael, who worked as an accountant, decided to dig deeper. He requested copies of the HOA's financial statements, public records that Karen was required to make available. Karen resisted, claiming they were too complicated for anyone but her to understand. But Michael insisted, quoting HOA bylaws. Reluctantly, Karen handed over heavily redacted documents. Even so, glaring inconsistencies jumped out. Tens of thousands of dollars marked as miscellaneous community, expenses, payments to vendors. That didn't exist. Even a mysterious consulting fee that matched the cost of Karen's new SUV almost exactly. Michael's suspicions grew stronger. He began comparing receipts, bank statements, and even property tax records. The pattern became undeniable. Karen was siphoning HOA funds straight into her personal luxuries. Word spread quietly among residents. Fear mixed with anger. How much had she stolen? Hundreds of dollars? Thousands? Or was it even worse? People began secretly meeting at Michael's house, carefully avoiding Karen's watchful eye. Together, they built a case, photographs of her lavish purchases, copies of questionable invoices, and testimony from neighbors who had seen delivery trucks dropping off luxury furniture. The community was outraged, but going up against Karen was dangerous. She held power, influence, and the HOA checkbook. Everyone knew if she discovered their investigation, she would retaliate. Fines, harassment, maybe even lawsuits. Still, the evidence was too strong to ignore. Michael suggested something bold. Instead of confronting Karen directly, they should take the evidence to the authorities. After all, embezzlement wasn't just unethical, it was a federal crime. The neighbors hesitated. Could they really bring in law enforcement? The neighbors agreed to move cautiously. Michael compiled their evidence into a detailed report. He cross-checked Karen's supposed community landscaping project against the HOA's expenditures. Instead of planting trees, the funds had been routed to a luxury spa company. A line item labeled security upgrades actually paid for Karen's home surveillance system. This was no minor slip-up. It was systematic theft. The community realized Karen had likely been running this scheme for years, but they couldn't simply walk into the local police department. Cases like this involved bank fraud, wire transfers, and financial embezzlement, territory that belonged to federal investigators. So Michael called the FBI's white-collar crime division. At first, the agent sounded skeptical, but when Michael emailed the detailed spreadsheets, receipts, and photographs, the tone changed immediately. "We'll look into this further," the agent assured him. The investigation began quietly. FBI agents interviewed residents, discreetly gathering testimony. They pulled HOA bank records and found Karen had been moving money into multiple personal accounts. Transfers disguised as vendor payments were redirected straight to her. Even worse, Karen had taken out a special assessment fee the previous year, claiming the HOA needed emergency roof repairs for the clubhouse. No repairs were ever done. Instead, Karen had taken a 2-week vacation in the Bahamas, first class all the way. The FBI widened their net. They tracked Karen's purchases, designer handbags, diamond jewelry, multiple vacations, and even a down payment on a vacation home. All of it funded by stolen HOA money. The total amount, nearly $500,000. Meanwhile, Karen carried on as if nothing was wrong. She lectured neighbors about keeping their houses up to community standards, all while wearing a $3,000 coat bought with their dues. Residents struggled to keep quiet, knowing she had no idea that federal agents were closing in. Michael and the others lived in suspense. Every time Karen walked past, they feared she might have caught on. But Karen remained arrogant, convinced her reign was untouchable. Then, one night, FBI agents arrived at Michael's door. They told him the case was nearly complete, and soon they would act. "We just need her in possession of one more fraudulent document," the agent explained. The residents' patience stretched thin, but Michael reassured them, "Justice is coming. We just have to hold out a little longer." And indeed, justice was closer than Karen could ever imagine. It was a brisk Tuesday morning when Karen strutted into the HOA meeting hall, blissfully unaware that her life was about to implode. She slammed her gavel, barking orders at the room full of neighbors. "Late fees will be doubled," she declared, "and anyone with weeds in their yard will be fined immediately." The neighbors exchanged looks. Many of them had already spoken to the FBI and knew that today was special. Karen had just prepared a new maintenance project. Form another fraudulent document. Little did she know it would be her undoing. As Karen handed out the papers, two men in suits walked into the room. At first, she smiled, assuming they were new homeowners. But when they flashed their badges, her smile froze. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, ma'am," one agent said firmly. "We need you to come with us." The room went silent. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for support. But the neighbors simply stared, arms crossed, finally seeing justice arrive. Karen tried to protest. "This is a mistake. I'm the president of this HOA. You can't just—" But before she could finish, one agent presented a warrant. The charges were clear: wire fraud, embezzlement, and misuse of funds. The agents handcuffed her right there in front of everyone. Gasps and whispers filled the room as Karen's face turned pale. "You can't do this to me! I made this community what it is!" she shrieked. But her words fell flat. Everyone knew she hadn't built the community. She had bled it dry. As the FBI escorted her out, reporters who had been tipped off snapped photos. Karen's once perfect image was shattered, broadcast across the evening news. "HOA president arrested in federal embezzlement case," the headlines screamed. The neighbors felt a wave of relief. For years, Karen had terrorized them with fines, threats, and arrogance. Now she was the one facing consequences. But beneath the satisfaction was anger. $500,000 gone. Would they ever get it back? The FBI promised restitution efforts. But money wasn't the only thing Karen had stolen. She had robbed the community of peace, trust, and years of harmony. Still, justice had finally caught up. The reign of HOA Karen was officially over. Karen's arrest rocked the community. News crews camped outside the neighborhood for days, interviewing residents who had lived under her rule. Stories poured out: unfair fines, harassment, and the blatant double standard between how Karen treated herself versus everyone else. The FBI's case moved swiftly. With mountains of evidence, Karen was indicted on multiple federal charges. In court, prosecutors laid out the lavish details of her theft: luxury cars, spa treatments, vacations, jewelry, all funded by hardworking neighbors' HOA dues. The judge showed little sympathy. Karen tried to play the victim, insisting she had worked tirelessly for the community and that the funds were compensation for stress. But the jury didn't buy it. They found her guilty on all counts. Sentencing day arrived. The courtroom was packed with neighbors, many of whom had suffered under her petty rulings. Karen sat trembling in her designer suit, no longer confident. When the judge handed down a 12-year federal prison sentence, gasps filled the room. "Let this be a message," the judge said sternly. "Abusing community trust for personal gain will not be tolerated." The HOA was left in ruins financially, but with Karen gone, they began rebuilding. Michael and a few others volunteered to form a new board. Transparent, honest, and focused on restoring trust. They implemented strict financial oversight, ensuring no one would ever have unchecked access to funds again. Slowly, the community began healing. Neighbors who once avoided each other out of fear of Karen's wrath now held barbecues, shared tools, and supported one another. The shadow Karen had cast was finally lifting. As for Karen, prison life was far from the luxury she had stolen. Gone were the designer handbags and first-class vacations. Instead, she wore an orange jumpsuit, her empire reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. The neighborhood learned an important lesson. Vigilance and unity could overcome even the most corrupt leader. And while they could never erase the damage Karen had done, they had reclaimed something far more valuable: freedom from her tyranny. Karen had thought she was untouchable, but in the end, justice always knocks. And when it does, even the self-proclaimed queen of an HOA must answer.